Hello lovely heads, Lorenzo here with another KSP Engineering. Today I bring you the LDS Fireworm. Its payload is 100 tons to low curb in orbit, with of course a corresponding delta V of about 5 kilometers per second. Liftoff weight is just 773 tons. 773 tons. Yeah, it's fairly light. So it's a light rocket with a large payload fraction and a cheap launcher cost of just 206,000 credits. Now, what you see here is the ultimate in simplicity. There is only one liquid booster firing at any moment, and let's see how this does to orbit then, shall we? Let's see. Here we go. Firing that up, and whilst of course mostly sales pitch, this video is also a challenge because I had a really hard time designing this to be a single core liquid fueled rocket, and there's no real reason I wanted to, rather than I like single core rockets. I set myself the challenge of putting 100 tons to low curb in orbit, and this is not a difficult challenge this is not a difficult challenge as viewed as to the difficulty, and it's fairly easily doable. You just build a larger rocket than this and you put it there easy. But I set myself the challenge and the desire to make a simple rocket that would have just one core, basically serially staged, just one liquid engine firing at once. And as you can see, I made this and I think it looks great. Obviously this top bit, here is the cutoff point. All these nuclear engines, they don't count, they are the payload. They are the compact heavy things I put on top. So up till here, this is the rocket we are using today. It uses 16 solid boosters, so well, that's that for single core, but otherwise I couldn't get it up. And off they go. And because this ascends fairly slowly, it's at the limits of what this single most powerful stock engine can lift. We spent a fairly large amount of time going more or less straight up. That is not the most efficient flight path, but it's okay for this because there is literally no other way I could make it happen, and that's also why I made it a challenge as well. I am really curious as to see what you can come up with. So if you think I made this really stupidly, go ahead, grab the craft file, make it better, lift a larger payload to low curb in orbit and show me, because I spent some time on optimizing the single core thing. The only limitation is of course use only one liquid engine firing at once. Now I understand you can of course just use more than 16 SRBs and build very far sideways with more SRBs. Well, if you can make like an interesting solution work with more SRBs, I won't be a dick about it, but yeah, if you're just going to solve the whole issue just with SRBs, that's not really what I'm meaning here. If you can play with the mass ratios and the thrust to weight and the amount of fuel that we're bringing up, and thus get a larger payload to a useful orbit, that's what I mean. And that's, I dare say, pretty difficult to get more than 100 tons in low curb in orbit with the limitation of having just one liquid engine firing at once. So here we are transferring to our proper second stage. It's a big engine, and this one is really efficient as long as you take it to space. 380 seconds of specific impulse in vacuum conditions versus just like 280 at the ground. So that's also why we needed that bigger engine for the last bit of atmosphere clearing. Yeah, just the last bit of atmosphere clearing. Now we can think about pitching over because we are now well, above most of the atmosphere and have a decent thrust to weight ratio again with this bigger engine. Now of course this rocket was made to be simple to fly, and it is. It includes a SES system here. You don't need to pay extra for that, it's standard included on all models, and of course the big engine has a massive whomping gimbal that will just yonk the rocket in any direction you may please. And now we get to the boring bit of this ascent, just waiting until the fuel runs out. You want to closely follow your prograde marker on this bit, because this again doesn't have too much in the way of spare delta V, so you don't want to have your apoapsis at about 250 kilometers, because that means you're going to crash on the other side of the planet. So you want to aim at about 80-90 kilometer circular orbit. Never said it would take you anywhere but there, so use that. Right, I think we can wait it out now. I'm going to jump to this stage burnout, because you have already decided whether you want to buy this rocket or not, and the answer is of course yes. Use it for those 100-ton payloads to orbit, and 100 tons is sufficient for any lightweight mission with like 1 Kerbal, and a basic lander to most celestial bodies, probably excluding the ones like Tylo that are heavy and don't have an atmosphere, or Eve if you actually want to get back from it. But if you can use an atmosphere on your target, on your celestial target, 100 tons should be easily sufficient to get a sizable lander there and then land it using parachutes. Now we've reached the 3rd stage of this rocket, the LDS Fireworm, and this is a comparatively small engine, this skipper, which serves, it's actually less efficient than the big one, which makes this choice illogical at first sight. But then again, shedding the mass of the big engine and its corresponding tanks actually counteracts the slight drop in efficiency here. If you want maximum ISP, you can switch this out for the Poodle engine, but then your flight trajectory becomes problematic, so maybe don't do that. The mainsail, on the other hand, whilst providing superior thrust-to-weight ratio, is just too inefficient for use at these altitudes, and you might not want to use that. You can see here I'm angling back up. That's because I didn't quite nail it on the first go with the trajectory. So we're already at 70, we were going down at 70 kilometers, which is a little bit too low actually. So I'm fixing that by pointing upwards. This is not the most efficient use of your rocket fuel, but hey, what you gotta do what you gotta do. In the meantime, we are slowly accruing the speed necessary to justifiably call our trajectory an orbital one. And I may actually not make it because I screwed up. I pitched over too hard, and now I'm fighting gravity drag, which is really not something you want to be doing at this stage of the flight. Pointing almost upwards is not good. Not good at all. We are almost at orbital speed though, so we might get away with grazing a little bit of atmosphere. Just a teeny tiny amount of atmosphere. I hope not though. I hope we don't have to. It would be embarrassing if this product demonstration would end up with, well, with the guys just crashing back to the planet. That's not a great start of a promising product lineup there. We're at 2 kilometers per second now, which is very close to orbital speed. Our tank is also very close to running out, so fingers crossed, you guys. Let's see, at 2100 meters per second, what's our trajectory looking like? Apoapsis 70.8, we need more speed. We are now officially back inside the atmosphere, just by a few hundred meters, but still, we don't really want to be eating atmosphere at this point. We want to be celebrating our emergence into space. That's engine burnout. Man, we're not in orbit. Screw that. Why is it always that in the testing runs everything goes great, and then in the product demonstration it all falls apart? Well, you can see a launch takes about 10 minutes. I will redo it and show you that yes, it can work. It just needs a little bit of careful piloting. So first you go straight up until the boosters run out. Then you jettison the boosters obviously, and you more or less keep the rocket pointing up or inside the prograde marker as long as it's up until the fuel in the first stage runs out. And when that happens, of course, you separate, well, you stage to the second stage, which you can use to fairly rapidly pitch over to a approximately 45-degree pitch. Just make sure you're over 30 kilometers of altitude before you do so, because you want that altitude first to maximize the efficiency of the rocket, and then you can basically start pitching over. Just make sure not to exceed 45 degrees, and once you get there, you basically just sit back in your acceleration couch and wait until the rocket runs out. And when that happens, you want your prograde marker to be at about 60 to 70 degrees and your predicted apoapsis somewhere between 80 and 90 kilometers. Then when it does run out, you switch to the last rocket, the third stage, and you point the rocket somewhere between the prograde marker and the actual horizon. And once you've done that, it is once again a waiting game until this stage is exhausted. And if all went well, that will have landed you just in orbit. Here we have 82 kilometers by 130, so not a lot of wiggle room to spare, but there you have it for just, what was it, 210,000? 206,000 credits, a payload of 100 tons. You see the orange tank, all the small tanks, with lots of nuclear rockets, of course a SAS system, a big capsule and everything, all you need for your space endeavors. So the LDS Fireworm requires some careful piloting, but will put all your stuff in orbit with the absolute maximum bang for your buck, because it's really cheap if you think about it. And if you think about it and think, what the hell, this is bullshit, I can do better, please do show me. Ladies and gentlemen, the LDS Fireworm. See you later.